And I just wanted to introduce our 3 webinar series events. This is our first event of 3 online panel discussions, each focusing on a different topic surrounding the new tools and trends in building energy analytics. Each session will include an introduction of 3 companies and their area of expertise, a 30-minute panel discussion on challenges and opportunities in their verticals, and how managers are leveraging their tools to break through barriers, followed by a Q&A session with the audience. This series of webinars will hopefully lead to in-person AEE Alberta event early next year, where we can do networking with our chapter members and discuss what analytical tools energy efficiency specialists are using. Today, for this panel, I will be your moderator. Please write your questions in the Q&A section. Joad from our AEE Alberta chapter will monitor the questions. We will address your questions after the panel discussion. And also, please try to direct your question to a certain panel member, so it's going to be easier to facilitate the questions and save us time. All right, so now I would like to move on to our first panelist, Christopher Naismith. Christopher is a building scientist and energy management specialist who has spent the last decade in boiler rooms and boardrooms, designing low carbon transition strategies. With the world's economies moving to carbon-free infrastructure, Christopher realized the immensity of the challenge facing real estate in realizing this transition. And so Audit was born. Audit is a platform for corporate real estate owners to build bottom-up carbon reduction strategies from the rich operating data gathered by their buildings. Christopher holds a graduate diploma in energy efficiency and building engineering from Concordia University and a Bachelor of Applied Science of Civil Engineering from the University of British Columbia. Christopher, just take it away.
Thanks very much. Let me share my screen here.
Okay, Christopher, can you see the slides? Yeah, just let me know when you want to switch the slides, okay?
Perfect. Thanks for bearing with us. I'm Christopher, founder of Audit, and our mission is to get carbon out of buildings. So I'd like you to imagine with me on the next slide that the year is 2051. And despite 3 decades of fires, displacement, and drought, the world is finally carbon-free. Real estate owners across the planet have taken up the call to retrofit their properties with low carbon technologies, carbon negative materials, and on-site renewables. And those, while it was a challenge, just back one slide, those that participated in this massive market transformation have emerged as leaders in this new no carbon economy. So at Audit, we envisioned this future and we asked ourselves, what has to be true to make it a reality? On the next slide. And the answer fundamentally is that we need a carbon transition plan for every existing building on the planet. With clear plans built on real data, we can create a meaningful path to tackling logistical, political, and financial barriers. So this for us was our light bulb moment. This is actually a data exercise. This is something that we can handle. And so we started working with large corporate real estate. Next slide. Especially those whose portfolios span geographies. These groups are facing immense financial pressure from carbon tax escalation, emissions penalties, and rising energy costs. They're firmly in the crosshairs of a groundswell of new policies and financial initiatives designed to aggressively decarbonize. Next slide. All of this is applying unprecedented levels of risk and making their stakeholders very nervous. And you'll see on the next slide that in fact, it's anticipated that without action, up to 11 trillion in real estate will be completely unsellable by 2050. And absolutely nobody wants to be left holding that bag. So under business as usual, the only mechanism available to real estate for finding conservation projects, as you'll see on the next slide, is the energy audit. So I was an auditor for many years, and I did a little bit of math. I added up all the energy and sustainability professionals on LinkedIn and figured out the amount of time it was going to take us just to build out the plans for what we need to do with our building stock. And spoiler alert, it's 200 years. So there has to be a better way. There's no other alternative. 2 slides forward. So then we ask the question, why? What's going on here? Well, it's not a capital problem. As the fundamental viability of real estate is threatened by this new economy, owners will spend whatever it takes to maintain viability in their portfolios. And it's not a problem with our ability to model the scenarios. On the next slide, academics and professionals have been working at this for years. And with advances in machine learning and AI, you can almost grab these models off the shelf. What the problem actually is that we've predicated all of this work on the fact that we have access to good data, and we don't. Data in real estate is fragmented, it's messy, and it's incomplete. But the good news is that it is there. So here's how we tackle that problem. An organization working with Audette first builds out a holistic picture of the portfolio that we're working with using real data generated by their buildings. This includes things like maintenance records, condition reports, and smart building networks. This data is then enriched by our continuously updating data sets on the ecosystems that surround buildings. This includes things like regulations, financial incentives, and public data like tax records and satellite imagery. This is all brought into an integration layer that presents an ongoing and dynamic picture of what specifically each of these buildings looks like. So this includes all physical equipment assets that exist within the building. On top of that platform, we can then run services that pull out and analyze that data in real time. So allowing our users to run and rerun carbon reduction scenarios as the technologies, the regulations, the grid intensities, the makeup of their portfolios change over time. And because we've established an ongoing connection to the building data, we're also able to track and report on the progress throughout the decarbonization journey. On the next slide, you'll see that this isn't designed to unseat energy auditors and design consultants. Kind of on the contrary, what we're focused on is creating long-term budgets and capital plans to an ASHRAE level 1 standard to show owners what they can expect to do and to spend to get to carbon free. But because the data is in a consistent and shareable format, when it is time to go to implementation, users can draw upon those professionals to do the work they're actually trained for, which is deeper levels of study, design and implementation work, measurement and verification. On the other side, on the next slide, it also makes it really easy for financiers and incentive providers to de-risk their investments, inject capital, and then track the impacts of that capital. On the next slide, you'll see the energy management cycle you're likely familiar with, roughly plan, do, check, act. Well, beyond our road mapping service, we're also building out a services and finance marketplace, which will allow users to access the professionals, the latest technologies, and the most attractive capital on the planet to make decarbonization projects happen. And then there's verification. Everything up to this point has been software only. At this stage, we can deploy data collectors to actively track large, complex, no carbon investments. But it's obviously not enough to just touch this top level of real estate in the market. As you see on the next slide, we've chosen to start with large corporate real estate because the data is good and the drive is there. But through this work, we're able to collect high quality data that shows us exactly what to expect in buildings. And as you'll see on the next slide, we're able to train AI to know what to do with those archetypical buildings or those HVAC topologies that we run into and continue to gain intelligence on. This will then allow us to move into segments of the market where data might not be so robust, and ultimately to help them to implement the data systems that are necessary to long-term carbon management. Finally, the last step is the ability, once we have the ability to analyze buildings across markets, We can work with regional governments to collect massive data sets and audit entire geographies. This could include things like aircraft or drone collected LiDAR, high resolution satellite imagery, thermal mapping, or bottom up records like smart grid data, gas hookups, cooling tower inspection records. The possibilities are really endless when you know what to look for. So after some amazing early growth, we're happy at this point to represent users with almost $1 trillion in real estate assets. But we absolutely can't stop there. We're looking to make that number 3 trillion by next year. So if you're an asset or property manager targeting zero carbon, we want to talk to you about how we can help. We're also scaling up. So we want to hear from data engineers and building scientists with a passion for building the no carbon economy, because the path to 2051 starts right here. And we invite you to join us on our mission to build a carbon transition plan for every existing building on the planet. Thanks.
All right, thank you very much, Christopher, for your presentation. I'm going to stop sharing, and I would like to introduce our second panelist, Tabor Yashchemsky, if I pronounce it right. So as a principal of Sustainable Projects Group, Tabor has overseen more than 1,200 energy efficiency projects across Canada in industries ranging from industrial to commercial. He has a Master of Engineering in Clean Energy Engineering and holds his CEM and EP designations. Over the past decade, Tabor has been an active proponent in promoting energy efficiency across Canada and has presented to universities, boards, and energy managers on effective strategies for implementing energy efficiency into operation. Tabor, the floor is yours.
And I guess hopefully we're not in the same issue. Are you guys seeing the note deck?
We can see it.
What was that?
See your slides.
The proper slides. Perfect. Okay. Thanks for the introduction. I guess I won't get into too much of my background. Perfect. So Sustainable Projects Group is our company as a whole. You know, our organization really focuses around, maybe I'll go back one, around action within energy efficiency. So for those of you that know us, we've got one department purely dedicated to energy auditors, engineers, and designers. We have another department purely dedicated to implementation. So these are the trades folks that just focus on energy efficiency implementation. So there are plumbers, electricians, power engineers, etc. And then we've got a third department which focuses around software. And they've been working on this project now for the last 2 years. And basically the software is called JOBI. It's the Joint Operational Building Intelligence Tool. And for many of you guys, I guess anybody that's run into issues or have been in the same situation where we've probably all been, trying to connect hundreds of different Excel sheets, ret screen models, eQuest, all those fun tools. If you've tried to connect those and they just don't work properly or not giving you the information you need, we've ran into the same problem, and that's why we started a software group and started making Joby. So everything I'm going to cover here is just sort of why, you know, sort of how we ran into those problems and what we've done to overcome them, and then try to give you guys a sense of what this tool looks like or how it works for each of the for energy managers where they're trying to implement and use this in their organization, whether you're a consultant or a company in general. So basically what happened, we ran into these 3 key problems while we were doing energy audits. You know, first, the problem we've got is that all energy audits to date, technically, when you make a PDF, they're static, right? They lose value over time. They become less and less accurate over time. You can't take into account for interactive effects so you can account for interactive effects for day 1, but you can't account for them over a certain period of time, obviously, because as time goes on, your PDF isn't updating. And then obviously decisions have to be made then based on outdated data. Second big challenge we came across is costing for implementation is wildly inaccurate. There's ways that you can price this out on a cost per square foot. You can pull data based like average costs for lighting installations, controls, etc. But it really only helped from a high level perspective. And we were trying to solve the solution, basically trying to come up with a solution to focus in on accurate implementation costs. So to take that basically roll in some of that ASHRAE level 3 aspects into this, into the energy model itself. And then the third big challenge we ran into was essentially there's only so much a consultant or an energy manager can do or consider at one time. When you have a 50-page energy audit, all these level 2 energy audits, and you're trying to consider and develop a strategy, you can do a good job. We find about 10 buildings. As it gets more than that, it becomes harder and harder to actually get down to them, sort of that optimized approach. So we're trying to find a way, because most of our clients have around, it's really about 400 to about 1,200 buildings across the country. And one person, even 4 or 5 people, have a hard time coming up with the optimized approach. So that was a third thing we were trying to address. So, we're really focused on people power. We want to make sure that the strategy takes into account feedback from everybody on the site level, your property managers, operations managers, your consultants, your trades folks. We're trying to take all of this data, group it into one thing, and then effectively implement that into a tool that considers the actual goals of the organization. We've got totally separate presentations that hopefully you guys have a chance to see at some of the other AE events around decision analysis and sort of balancing the feedback from the decision makers in a group. But anyways, that's really sort of the core of what we do. So to address the first issue, we call it a continuous energy audit. So this is a dynamic energy model. So at any time a new piece of data goes in, your energy model updates. Anytime you put in a new tool, put in a new boiler, etc., the model will automatically update, so that when it comes time to make a decision on a building, you have data of what's actually going on. So we try to promote that basically by saying complex decisions really require the complex continuous dynamic data, and that's what this provides. Second barrier, we overcame that by creating something called ECM groups. And if you're really going to take one takeaway from Joby relative to the other 2 tools that we're talking about, we spent the majority of our time, because we've got that trades background mixed in with the engineers, we really wanted to hone in on making sure that the ECMs, or energy conservation measures, are actionable. So we do a lot of work around ECM grouping and basically making sure that as the energy model changes, we can actually change the pricing of the projects. We've got some models around what things should cost, where, etc. And so that's basically the second part of what we were looking to address. And then the last one was making sure you get that optimized strategy. So once all of that data is in place, how do you properly use it, and how does it properly get organized to give you that optimal strategy? And we got an entire presentation around the analytical hierarchy process, but it just allows us, so you can get your CAO, CFO, CF, so everybody that has different motivators within an organization, or we do a lot of work with the governments as well. We get feedback from each departments and are able to get a proper blended balance between what makes most sense to pursue within your strategy and when to do it. So, and most importantly, now that you have all of your energy models in one place, similar to what Chris was saying, as new technologies come out, new laws come out, new carbon or new taxes come out, you want to be able to have your strategy adjust and be able to account for that without having to go back to the drawing board, recalculate your data, recalculate all the options and things you have to approach. So that's a big piece of what we do. So we try to help you get out and lead, your organization get out in front, and then stay out in front. Okay, so, basically, where do we sit compared to some of the other tools? Like, this isn't just, this isn't for managing energy bills. This isn't a building control system. We really we call it sitting between the data and action within an organization. So it's a platform to house all of the dynamic energy models and a tool to keep them up to date. It supports decision analysis and optimizing the approach with actual real costs. Supports execution of the energy strategy through project management. So we go through that whole sort of reporting period, measurement and verification, everything that's needed in order to act on the strategy you put together. That's all built into this part, into Joby. And then we support on the maintenance and continuous optimization. Like I said, get you out in front and then make sure you can stay there. So 5 brief features I'll kind of glaze over here. So one is, and there's many, many more. I'm happy to run people through it, but I think the most useful ones for energy managers that we want to highlight is we can upgrade, basically we want to try to upgrade the thinking from traditional to advanced. So that's that, get rid of the static energy audits and focus on the dynamic ones. The second one is really want to turn your data into action. Third one, ensure every dollar invested is leveraged as far as possible. And I'll briefly show how we can get you ahead when it comes to incentives. Fourth is minimizing risk and decision making. So there's a couple of different languages that most managers think through. Finance is one, but risk is one that really gets overlooked. And that's a key focus. So we can do risk analysis on everything. And the last one is continuous strategic optimization. So as Chris mentioned, we take a similar approach. We want to make sure that these models are dynamic. So as they change, as you get, whether we're connected to monthly energy billing or we're right up connected to submeters, we want to make sure anytime a new data point comes in, the energy model has the ability to update. As an energy auditor, when you build a model, you're literally looking back at energy bills for the last 3 years. So you get 36 data points and try to fit, build something that would fit in what you've seen as actual data or evidence in the real world. This does the same thing. So you still build, as the energy auditor, you build the model, and then now it tries to keep it up to date based on new information that comes in. And then if things start to deviate further away from past a certain threshold, which you're able to set, you get a notification so a human can come and look at it and make sure the model gets updated. So it's really just focusing on more energy savings, lower implementation costs, and getting better technology adoption. So your client's always putting the right stuff in. So that second one I mentioned, turning data into action. So we want to make sure, so many groups spend so much money on their data. You're going out and you pay for energy audits, you pay for EMIS, you pay for submetering if you've got that in place. Do something with it, right? Let's help you get at that, and let's help you turn that into actual action. So that's a big part of what we're doing here. Leverage that data to make sure it's basically goes as far as humanly possible. We just want to make sure that, again, taking that data from that AHP or analytic hierarchy process, making sure that we are getting as close to what our client or your client is looking for. That's something we can do within this tool itself. Measurement verification is built into this so that when you do go in, as you do these projects, you need to make sure you're hitting your targets, and you want to make sure you're reporting on your targets to your superiors or whoever your clients you're reporting to. So basically what we can do, whether we're using submeters to do like very accurate M&V, we can also create what we call virtual meters or virtual meter points, where we'll take a look and we build models to see what should be happening in there. So basically it allows you, when you go to your client, you can obviously suggest that they put in submeters and get that really high accuracy data. If they don't have the money, and we're talking about a small 40-unit, multi-unit residential building, they're not putting in submeters, we can use these virtual meter points. Saves a massive amount of money. Obviously, we lose some accuracy in the data, but it gives them enough accuracy in order to make decisions around what should be happening. And then the last piece, as an organization becomes a leader, we want to make sure they stay a leader. So again, to Chris's point, and I'm sure to Amir's as well, we want to make sure that as things change, you can change that strategy as well. So you don't have to go back to the drawing board, start again, recalculate anything. That's easy enough to do when you're looking at 1 or 2 buildings, but when you have 650 buildings in front of you and there's a slight change to the carbon tax, that is months and months of work. This now takes about 2 or 3 minutes. Strategy's updated, targets are updated, everything can be adjusted within your group. So that was the last feature. And basically who should be using it. So really we're supporting energy managers in quickly establishing value in whatever organization you're working in and making sure that you get there's that long-term demand for your services. Huge problem in our industry. You get funded for 2 years. If you don't have the buy-in or feedback, that ends up being a 2-year contract and that's it. With Joby, we help you get the data you need in that short period of time, build that strategy, and give the data, the reporting, everything your organization needs to make sure you have a long-term position within that company, because you become invaluable to the rest of the group. And if you're a consultant, same thing applies, right? This allows you to provide a huge amount of value in a very short period of time, and just allows you to keep that relationship with your clients because you can manage all these things. There's a pricing model in place which allows you, it's essentially no cost for the energy auditor or the consultant. And yeah, just allows you to keep that thing going with any of the groups you're working with. So in a nutshell, I mean, 10 minutes, there's only so much we can cover, but in a nutshell, that's sort of the challenges that we came across and how we've addressed it with the tool. And I definitely encourage you, if you've run into similar challenges or you've got any questions about that, happy to run you guys through demos or sort of taking a look at the features and show you what it's working with. Right now, we're using it with the Yukon government. We're doing all of their buildings across the board, and yeah, and they've allowed us to share that data. So we can use them as an example in the future. So that is it for Joby.
All right. Thank you very much, Tabor. It was a very interesting presentation. Looks like it's a turnkey platform, Joby. You can stop sharing your screen now. And I would like to introduce our third panelist, Amir Yadgar. Amir studied civil and environmental engineering with a focus on climate change, modeling, and sustainability. Amir has valuable experiences gained from his academic and industry career in the past 15 years, working as a researcher, R&D manager, and consultant in different companies. Amir is also an expert in applying artificial intelligence and machine learning to climate change models and energy simulation. Besides his technical background, Amir is an entrepreneur as well. He established his own startup 4 years ago in clean tech industry named Exergy. Exergy manages and optimizes the energy consumption in the buildings with advanced AI analytics without installing any physical sensors. They offer optimized renovation or improvement scenarios for the buildings to reduce the energy bill. Amir has received many governmental grants for his excellence in research. Hey, Amir, take it away.
Well, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. And can you see my presentation? Yes?
Yep.
Okay. So hello, everyone. Thanks for joining the webinar. So my name is Amir. I'm going actually to present the products we developed for optimization and managing the energy consumption in the buildings. We called it Exergy, if it goes. Okay. Based on the US EPA publications, we spend more than 93% of our times inside the building, either to work or for living or for like gym, anything, restaurant, dining, anything. So that's why the buildings actually are the most important contributor to the energy consumption. They are consumed more than 48% of the total energy actually in the world. Based on the Natural Resources Canada, in 2019, only the commercial building, we have actually different types of the building: residential, multi-unit residentials, warehouses, plazas, hospitals, academic universities, everything. Just the commercial buildings spend more than $6 billion of energy in Canada. The number for US is more than $200 billion, and that's a huge number. In order to be to consider the next generation, we need to be more green, to have more greener actually buildings and building sector. So we need a tool that can manage and optimize the energy consumption of the buildings as fast, as accurate, and as easy as possible. That's why we started Exergy. And the reason was actually I developed and worked with theoretical models for more than like 15 years in my research, my academy actually studies and everything. I used like the physical equilibrium, like the formulation, theoretical, anything. But after knowing how to deal with the big data, like the AI, deep learning, and these kind of algorithm, I know that there are many other ways that we can actually deal with the data, and we can develop more new models to simulate and to get the results similar to the other theoretical models with a more accuracy and in a reasonable time. So our solution is Exergy is for the simulation of the energy consumption. We collect the simple input. I'll actually explain it more later. Then we run the AI model on top of that to simulate the energy consumption to get the energy model out of the building. Based on that, we predict the energy consumption of cost for the next 50 years of the life cycle of the building. And then we on another neural network algorithm we provide the optimized improvement scenario, how to reduce the energy bills for the future. Then we provide the energy auditing for the building based on the client's needs, if they want actually to apply for the green building certificates like LEED or anything else. And then we apply the governmental incentives because of the databases we have. So we tell the client which program he can use. So in terms of the environmental impact, again, for the commercial building, we have around 500,000 commercial building in Canada and more than 5 million in US. Only in Canada in 2015, they emitted more than 100 million tons of equivalent CO2, which is a huge number. And this is the 17% of the total greenhouse gas emissions in Canada. So if we can actually, based on the results we show and we publish, we can actually reduce that more than up to actually 20% of the energy consumption, which going to be like a huge number in terms of the total GHG emissions. What's the advantages we took in developing the model? The first one, the most important value proposition is the processing time. Like if you talk to the energy advisors and if you talk to the larger like energy efficiency consulting firms, the most important thing is time. If you want actually to do a comprehensive energy modeling of a building, like let's say like a 15 stories commercial building, it at least takes about 5-6 business days to just warm up the model, to input the detailed required input values and to actually run the model. We can do that in seconds, instantly, in seconds, like in 1 or 2 seconds. That's based on how we analyze the data. The approach we are using in a comprehensive whole building envelope to consider all the components of the building envelope, rather than like a simplistic approach, just considering the HVAC or the lighting system. And that's because of the complexity level of the other kind of softwares and models. The accuracy is more than 90%, which is a huge accuracy because we are using a benchmarking system, and we benchmark actually a detailed modeled energy, a detailed building that's energy modeled. So we use that benchmark system to actually increase the accuracy. And as far as we know, this is the only AI-based model that consider the whole building envelope. I'm not talking about the models that, for example, the Nest or like something like other things like Nest that's considered the HVAC system. Only we are considering all the components. I'm actually going through an example of what we did in Concordia University in downtown Montreal. Concordia University has 17 buildings in Montreal. One of them, which is the like a 30 years old building in downtown Montreal. We did the optimization of the energy consumption over there. How we enter the model, enter the input data into the model. We can extract the data from the beam level tree. So that's would be like the easiest things to do that. Or if there are no digitalized plan, we use the blueprints, the drawings, the hard copies and everything, and we extract data based on those. And at the end of the day, if there is no planning at all, there is no drawing at all, we can actually use a simple questionnaire. So I'm assuming here that there is no drawings or digitalized plan. So for example, in time, you can see for the roofs, for the external walls, for the facade, glazing, windows, lighting, HVAC systems, even the HVAC operations, we have different actually categories that we can actually input into the model to simulate the building on top of that. After we did the energy modeling, we can actually provide the improvement scenario. By the improvement scenario, we can actually tell the client if you want to change the roof, how we want to do that, and which budget. In terms of, for example, changing the facade, changing the window, changing the HVAC system, any components of the building. And for each component, we have 3 levels. As you can see in this table, we have, for example, S1, S2, and S3. It's based on the requirements of the clients. For example, for the existing building, if the client doesn't want to touch the windows because it's very complex and it's very like expensive, we dictate the model to don't touch the windows, go to, for example, to the materials, to the facade materials, or to the HVAC system. So it's very flexible in terms of the different plan we have for the improvement scenarios. So for the Concordia, we use the beam model. Then we actually extracted some data because it was a very old building, and then we provide the energy models. As you can see in the iterations, we chose, based on the client's needs, we chose 3 like scenarios. You can see the numbers in the iterations. For example, one of them is 2,300 something. So we run the model because it's like a training model, it's an AI model. The model at least run for more than 5,000 iterations for each round. So we can, and it's going to the optimization, as you can see here. So we compare the total energy consumptions with the life cycle cost. So if you can see the red dots, it's they are the less cost with the less consumption of the energy, which we call them the optimization based on the AI algorithm. So yeah, we chose that one, and this goes to the optimization. So that's how we optimize the data. I don't want to go deeply on the technical side, just to show how we optimize the LCA on the TCC, total energy consumptions. So we provided 3 scenarios to the clients, and the clients go with the scenario B with different, actually it has the alternatives for the roof, for the external walls, for the window, to the facade material, to the HVAC and HVAC operations. We told the client the total energy consumption and life cycle cost for implementation that scenario. For the we did the life cycle assessment as well. We used the Athena, which is a very powerful software developed in Canada. This was actually our results. The red dots are the real numbers. The graphs are how we use the artificial neural network to actually simulate and to reach the targets, and then where the regression method using the AI. So you can see we actually the model can provide a very good regression, and that's why we have a very good accuracy out of these outputs. And yeah, that's it. Thank you. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, Amir. It was a great presentation. I have actually a very quick question. So you mentioned this scenarios A, B, and C. Did these scenarios came from AI component of the software, or it's something that you developed and analyzed before?
No, it exactly. Every scenario comes from the AI component. It's based on the deep learning algorithm. So the model actually goes and see which scenarios are more optimized. So as I told, we actually each round the model iterates about 5,000 round iteration per building per model. Actually.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So now we're actually very good on time, and we're going to get to our panel discussion. Going to introduce our, well, thank you very much, all of you, all the panel, to highlight your products and highlight the tools and techniques that energy managers and clients can use, you know, in their buildings. And as Amir mentioned, yeah, it's like we spend a lot of time in the building, so it's we need to do something with the buildings and make them more energy efficient. So I have a first question for the panel, and I expect it to be a little bit self-guiding, so feel free to jump in and collaborate on the question. So the first question for the panel I have, what are the biggest challenges you have been facing in the energy efficiency sector? What challenges do you foresee in the short and long terms? Amir, would you like to start tackling this question?
Yes, sure. Actually, as I mentioned in my presentation, and Canada has committed with other 120 countries, they committed to the net zero carbon emissions by 2050. And as for the building industry is the most important contributor to the energy consumption, we need to do something with the building sector, and we need to actually make our buildings energy efficient. There are many things that we can actually mention here, but I think the most important thing right now is to actually have everybody in the building sector in one page, because we have actually different categories of technicians, of people, workers, players in the building industry. Let's say from designers, energy managers, contractors, quality control, building operators, facility managers, and at the end of the list, energy advisors. So they need to be actually on one page. And what's one page is to work with each other, to share the data, to get to the high-end technology, to know the technology, the other players. I'm not talking about the energy advisors, because energy advisors are they are playing with the computers. They know the high techs. The other players should come, they need to reach to this target, to come up with the new technologies and to share the data with the other players. So we have used the new tools. We need to use the new tools. We need to be more efficient in terms of providing the outputs and to make the buildings more energy efficient. That's what I'm saying, to put everyone, every player in one page.
Yeah. Thanks, Amir. Yeah. Christopher, do you have anything to add to this?
Yeah. So we are in the midst of a revolution. The world is transitioning to carbon neutral. It's now more than 82% of the global economy by GDP that has a mid-century zero carbon target. This is, I think Bill Gates calls it our new industrial revolution. We're living through it. This is an incredibly exciting time, but it presents a ton of challenges. And I read an article this morning about the EV market. It's going through something very similar. All these automakers have decided to go full electric by 2030. Well, the experts are raising their hand and said, have you looked at the supply chain? You can't do that without focus on mining, focus on the batteries, focus on the components that build that up. And I think we're in a very similar situation, is that in our case, we have to make massive investment in decarbonization, right? And there's tons of capital out there to make that happen. It's estimated at $1.3 trillion a year on average from now until 2050 is going to be funneled into this market. But the raw materials we're working with are the ideas, right? The raw materials are, where do we put that money? And that's really hard to do in the building space because they are small projects. They're under somebody else's control. They require a ton of investigation and thoughtful consideration. And we simply don't have the resources at the moment to even collect all of the ideas together to invest into. And so that obviously the audience here is at the front line of that. And so enabling professionals in this group to access those project ideas and bring them to market is in my opinion, the biggest problem.
Yeah, and I guess from my end, I completely agree with what Chris and Amir are saying. I mean, it's a massive, massive long-term issue for us to address. I think I'll take maybe a slightly different approach, more focusing on the short term, I guess. One of the biggest things that we're finding issues for most energy auditors, energy managers, whether it's you're a consultant or working within an organization, is honestly rampant inflation and concern about sort of a looming recession. And that definitely impacts what money is going to go to actually doing any of these projects that we're identifying, right? We spend all this time, all this money collecting data, making recommendations to our clients or to our organization. And then COVID hits, or similar, if a recession hits, the money's not going to be going to those particular projects. It goes to a boiler that is physically stopped working. They got to replace it, or the lights physically went out and that's what they need to replace. Now, that said, all of us know energy efficiency is the smart approach, right? If you don't have the money in your budget to do these major projects, you need to free up more capital. And one way to free up more capital is reduce your operating costs. So that's where all of us come in, right? And we're trying to reduce the operating costs by making all these buildings more efficient. Now, the trick with this is that if a recession hits and this inflation just continues to go out of control, the problem we're going to have is if the data is not in the hands of the decision makers, like Chris had mentioned, each of the individual decision makers of every single one of these buildings, if they don't have the data and know where the opportunities are, they're not going to get the money internally to be able to hire the consultants or hire the energy managers to collect that information to set a proper strategy. So honestly, I think the biggest short-term problem we have now is just a mad rush to get as much data as humanly possible for every one of these organizations so that they know what to do and how to reduce those op costs as a recession hits. So yeah, I think that's more of a short-term issue, but definitely something that we've seen sort of across the board with all of our clients.
Yeah, it seems like the visibility is very important all across, different departments on the client side. So it's like energy managers and specialists and the decision makers. So it should be probably some investment done so everyone be on the same page, as Amir mentioned, right? So it's even if the recession hits and we have a visibility of what's happening in the building and what our projections were. Yeah, I think it's very important.
I have a quick follow-up, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah.
I'm curious, Tabor or Amir, have you seen the narrative shift from energy efficiency towards carbon reduction in the conversations that you're having?
Oh, all over. I mean, it's all where the money is, unfortunately. So what ends up happening with all of our organizations as well, there's government fund, because the current federal government we have in place is really focused around carbon reduction. Like that's the dialogue, that's the wording they're using. Therefore, within every one of our organizations, they're changing the dialogue as well to line up with the federal government so that they can get incentive dollars to help us collect the data, to do the projects, et cetera. So as much as I'd like to think that it's because people are seeing it as carbon reduction being the important thing, not reducing op costs, I think it really has to do, it has been changing, but I think it has to do with the federal government incentive dollars.
Yeah, and to drill in on that one more time, how do you reposition, because going carbon free doesn't have a good payback. Like, so how do you reposition away from ops costs towards the broader goal at hand?
Yeah, we've got again another 1 hour presentation just on that. So it's about changing the language you use with the group. So as an energy manager, if you understand your approach is around carbon reduction, you want to hit net zero by 2050, you need to convert that into a language they understand. So everybody understands converting things into financial language, which is what all three of our tools do. But I think we also need to look at risk abatement. How do you convert that into risk? So we know that the federal government has said we are going to push for $170 per ton impact, or $170 per ton carbon tax. That I think that means $8.93 per gigajoule on top of whatever you're currently paying for gas. So there's a huge, I mean, that's like a 400% increase in variability in your gas costs compared to what people are paying now, especially in Alberta. So yeah, I think for us, it's really speaking that language. And so two of the big ones, finance and risk abatement. Sorry, Amir, I see you've got a comment as well.
Yeah, I have like a follow-up question for Chris. Chris, in terms of actually getting to that commitment of 2050, is there any, certain incentive to carbon reduction?
Yeah, well, I think it is that is to Tabor's point, where we need to reposition the entire narrative, is that this is about risk abatement. And like I'm going all for it, is your business will not be viable in this new economy. Like the CEO of BlackRock knows it, the CEO of Brookfield knows it, Mark Carney knows it. Like there are leaders and titans in this industry just saying, look, if you don't do this, you will become obsolete. And that's much more focused on the corporate side, obviously, but I think that, we'll see a lot of acceleration there with like 25% of Fortune 500 companies having a zero carbon target. like it's accelerating dramatically, and we have to reposition away from operational cost savings, and we have to stop pretending that we can get good payback on going carbon neutral. It's not, you can't. and as soon as we shift it towards, okay, it's about business viability, then that's when real key decision makers start to take notice.
That's great. Yeah, I love that.
Okay, good discussion. I would like to move on to the next question. If anyone wants to add more on our first question, or no? All good? Okay, so the next question that I have for panel is, how's your product or solution is transforming the job of an energy auditor or an analyst? So it's just like how we were talking about different levels in the organization. So I was just like curious to help, our audience as energy auditors, energy specialists, how these tools can be, applied on the field in their buildings where they work. So, and I was just wanting to start with Christopher, if you want to start tackling this question.
Yeah, sure. So I think it's even just acknowledging what the role of the energy manager and energy specialist has become within an organization, which is sort of a project manager and a platform integrator, is really important. I think we kind of have had this sense that their job is to audit things and pull forward recommendations, but in fact we do a lot of hiring other people to actually produce the recommendations and just keeping the data in check. And I think that's really where we need to double down. Buildings generate a ton of great data. And it's not just the obvious things like building automation systems, it's the maintenance record keeping systems, it's the asset condition reports, it's the registrar's schedule if you're a university, it's any activity that's happening in the building generates some data point about how that building operates, which gives us visibility that can really avoid the bottleneck, which is having to have somebody crawl around with a digital camera in your boiler room to figure out whether you have an ECM to do or not. And that's how we kind of unlock that value. So I see the role as an energy specialist or energy manager being really a platform integrator, somebody who can make sure that those data standards are in place. Like, what are you capturing in your maintenance records? Is it the size, age, and condition of every piece of equipment? Well, it should be. When you do an asset handoff as a corporate real estate, like what are you capturing about that building in order to know if it's a valuable asset to bring onto your portfolio? That should be every major piece of equipment, where they are in their life cycle and their condition. And once we have all that data into place, it actually becomes quite easy to pinpoint where the investment opportunity is.
Okay. Tabor?
Yeah, I guess to again, completely agree. Obviously, that's where I think all of these tools, that's what really why they've been created and why they've been put together, right? We're really focusing on that as a really important solution as things change. I guess if it's going to take a slightly different spin on it, would be the biggest thing for us, and because we do focus on training energy managers across the board, is job security. I think the whole focus of what we've done with this tool, we've just seen over and over again, a province gets a large chunk of money from the federal government to do energy efficiency. They create one program for replacing light bulbs. They create one program for data collection. They create one program for hiring energy managers in any large industrial group, university, et cetera. And then you get you're funded as an energy manager for 2 years in that role. Most energy managers are laid off 2 years after that contract is up, because there's not enough time in there with sort of traditional tools. There's not enough time for them to sort of establish the value within an organization. You go in, the lighting needs replaced, you do a bunch of LED projects, you show some operating cost savings, but that's not enough to convince an organization to continue to spend $100,000 a year to keep your job in place. So I think what we've really focused on with Joby is allowing you to get that information faster, just like with Exergy and Audit, same thing, get that information faster. And then we're making sure through the project management components, through the strategy execution pieces, you immediately start running, you're working right next to your project managers to make sure these projects are happening the way they should. You can hold your contractors accountable because you can do automated M&V, all of that. So yeah, for us, I think the main thing we're trying to transform in this aspect is job security for an energy manager. So.
Yeah, we'll talk about it a little bit later. And I was just like curious what if Amir wants to add to it. If your Exergy simulation tool is something that energy auditor or energy specialist can just take and put the data in and create the reports, or as you mentioned, different scenarios and present it for their management.
Yeah, actually, the most important thing I can mention here is actually we wanted to actually develop a tool so energy advisors can actually simulate the energy conditions of a building more easily and more accurate. So these two parameters, I think, the most important things that we thought in when we developed the tool. So yes, everything should be more accurate instead of actually using old school tools. We need to use actually the high tech, and that's why we think that this development is actually more optimized and good for the energy advisors and for their carriers.
Anyone wants to add? Yeah, so looks
More
like
data.
More data.
If
Yeah, looks like it's naturally flowing into my third question that I want to ask the panel. In many cases, the energy efficiency specialists sell the new technology internally to the executives or their management for funding approval. So they work with many different consultants, and consultants are, they have so many different products, so many different things, platforms, AI, machine learning. But how each of you prepare the energy specialists to support their business case when they present it to the management? What are the key selling points? Is your selling point the process improvement to save the cost, carbon or environmental reporting compliance, on the governmental side, or is it just like it's easy to use and it doesn't require a long onboarding process for the energy manager to start using it, start using your tools on a day-to-day basis? Maybe Tabor, if you want to start this.
Yeah, happy to. So I guess, you make a good point. Maybe elaborating, a good energy manager is also a good salesman or salesperson, because the only way you're going to get projects to happen is if you can take them and sell them internally. So I guess for our tool in general, if you're trying to sell it internally, there's a couple of things. I briefly mentioned before, make sure you're speaking the language. So easy enough to transfer it into cost savings, energy savings, etc. But again, learn the language of risk, right? Understand that as a CEO, as a CAO, whoever you're talking to, their job is primarily making sure they don't screw things up. It's just making sure they don't make a decision that's going to wreck what's currently happening and how things are currently moving. So really focus on that language of risk. And if you don't understand it, learn it. Another real big selling point for us is piggybacking. So, we've designed our tool to basically be able to pull off of other budgets. So in general, we would classify under the general idea or the general description of an energy management information system, or an EMIS. Some companies have budgets for that. We'll compete on RFPs to be an EMIS. We can do that. But we've also designed it where we can be a maintenance management tool. We can be an asset management tool. We meet the requirements of what they would call a CMMS or any of those other groups that there's already budgets there. And same thing, building condition assessment. So because Joby qualifies and has actively competed, one as an asset management tool, as a building condition assessment tool, we tell our energy managers, look around your organization right now. If there's already a budget set aside for those other tools, we'll come in, we'll compete, we'll win that, and then we'll give you all the value and all the stuff you need anyways, for a fraction of the cost, because we're pulling from a separate budget. I think that's the thing we've been the most successful with those groups, because now we don't need to go in and convince them they've got a problem that they don't know they have, and then they need to make a budget for it, and then they set in the budget for next year, and then we try to get involved. This way we can go in and usually get on board quite quickly. So yeah, that's probably the main kind of trick that I would use when talking to an energy manager.
Okay. Yeah, Christopher, maybe you can add how you
Sure.
tackle this, how you presented to an energy manager of the company.
We typically don't. So we fundamentally think that the idea that the energy manager should have to go knock on the VP's door to try and sell this is wrong, is broken. If the organization is serious and understands the risks that they're facing as an organization, they should be banging on the energy manager's door, like throwing money at them. And so the way that we do it is we start with the VP of asset, the VP of risk, the VP of whoever's in charge of asset strategy. That's where we go. And we explain to them the risk. So as an energy manager, all you got to do is make an intro. Our sales director will get in the room with them and show them how they, basically the conversation usually goes like this: look, you've tweeted carbon neutral. How are you going to do it? And just leave it there. Like, the answer inevitably is we don't know. And so then how is your business going to stay viable? How is your organization going to hit those targets if you don't know? And then in terms of the integration, the way we approach it is to try and offload as much of the work that the energy specialist and energy manager has to do by what we call a concierge or a white glove service. So each account gets paired with an data scientist, integration specialist, and a building scientist, who basically help to run the integration process, which is collecting all of the data and feeding it into the platform.
So you see the energy manager as a resource to implement the tools, right? So, but it's something that should come from above, from the VP and management, and trickle down to the energy manager, start using these tools, right?
Well, yeah, well, we think the energy manager and sustainability professional should be elevated in the organization.
Or elevated,
sure.
Yeah.
And they are a key resource in helping to, as I say, sort of integrate the data, make sure the data is robust, are in those conversations with the operations, with the projects team, to make sure their data is robust and feeding into the same data set. And then the last piece is, this is really a business intelligence exercise. So everybody needs to see that data represented in a slightly different way. So the way we handle that is just a customizable business intelligence interface that lets the CFO build out the charts they need to build, the energy specialists need to build out their charts, and then integrations into the various compliance reporting platforms. So Energy Star Portfolio Manager or GRESB or whatever they might be, getting that data out into the compliance ecosystem as quickly and efficiently as possible.
Yeah, I like this point. Excellent. Elevated energy managers. Amir, do you want to add to this, how you help equip the energy managers to sell your ideas and your tools?
Actually, just one sentence: the best thing that we can give to the energy advisors, including myself, is a good tool that can analyze the more data in less processing time. So that's the goal, and that's the thing. So
yeah, it's like as Christopher mentioned, it's like so many hours comes into just do the audit, right? And if you can automate it, then you just shorten the time, right? And manpower.
exactly.
Well, hours, yeah. Okay. Yeah, it was a very interesting discussion. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank the panel.